We got a good episode for you today. A really fun episode. We're not going to cover any specific stocks. We're not going to talk about a specific recommendation that I have. We're going to talk about some really big picture things that you need to keep in mind. Um, Things that you don't really hear a whole lot about. We're going to talk about the Delta variant in a way that you've never heard of before. Um, we're going to talk about kind of where the economy is right now, where the stocks are, where segments are looking right now, and really where you should expect things to go. And then, from there you can pick stocks. So if you have a question about a stock, you can let me know. But realistically, it's not like, hey, something went up 4% today, or something went down 8%, or something went up 11%. Let's go buy it or sell it. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some big picture items. So overall, I want to talk to you about a few different things. We're going to start with something I got from Yahoo Finance, and I like them just because they're I've had a Yahoo account since 1996, so like I'm not getting rid of that email address. It's my junk email address, but I'm still not getting rid of it. And the reason I don't use it actively is because Yahoo, when they got bought by Verizon, decided that they were going to data mine your emails. So if you don't know this and you have a Yahoo account, understand that when you send an email or an attachment, they literally go rifling through it, seeing whatever private information is in there, and then they try to market stuff to you and do whatever they do. I don't know what they do. But I was like, I'm done with that. I signed up for an email with my alma mater. It's a .edu address. So with that being said, I know they're not going to do that. But anyway, these guys send some pretty cool articles, and it really looks like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, because you get these guys saying very, very different things, which is good because you get to kind of parse it out and see, kind of what makes sense, what arguments are valid and ones are, just not really well thought out. So, but this one, this guy, Brian Sutzi, I presume that's how you pronounce his name, talked about these stocks would be big winners over the next decade. And I'll just tell you right now, when I see an article with this title, I immediately roll my eyes. But with this being said, I gave it a little bit of a shot, and there was actually something really interesting in there. So you can't always judge a book by its cover. Sometimes you can't judge an article by its headline. But yeah, 95% of the time you can. But in this case, it's a little bit different. So something he said really caught my eye because it's something I really believed in general. I said it's time to push aside those high-growth tech stocks you've been obsessed with these past 5 years and rotating into value names, which we're going to talk about in a second. And the reason I say that, it's not that the tech stocks were bad. I mean, they made a lot of people a lot of money, but are you really going to buy at the high end when people are like, oh my gosh, I've made a ridiculous amount of money on these tech stocks. Oh, okay. Do you want to buy my stocks? No, I don't. You can keep them, keep unrealized gains for all I care. But we're not going to do that. But when we talk about value names, I was like, well, what does that mean? If he's smart, I'm thinking he's talking about the stocks that we talk about in this podcast. And so one of the things that I looked at is I kind of scrolled down here, and he talked about the performance of value stocks. We're going to get into that. And they really are kind of the reopening stocks. So if we look at kind of where those stocks have been, basically you look at the 2008 crash, which really didn't affect them all that much. Then COVID hit, and you could see the massive drop off. That's when COVID hit right there, where it came back up, and you barely can see it right here, but there's a little bit of a drop off, and that is the Delta variant. See if you can zoom this in. Yeah, that's let's take a look. I know it's getting pretty big. But that little thing right there is the Delta variant drop-off that we've had over the last few months. All right. So with that being said, I was like, all right, we'll see if this guy kind of figured things out. I mean, if you're on this podcast, you've figured things out for a while. And so one of the things this guy talked about, let's see, in a new research paper, he points out that value stocks not only trade in the cheapest decile, that's 1/10 in history, but they're in the bottom half of the cheapest decile, which is basically a statistical thing that he's talking about. So anyway, one of the things that I looked at was this article that he was talking about here, and did I miss the value turn? So specifically what he's talking about is the value stocks going into pandemic stocks. So the pandemic-driven value crash, savage value stocks around the world, racked up a 21% underperformance from January 2020 to August 2020. And realistically, if they said, January to March, it'd be a lot more than that. So anyway, so we went down here a little bit, and again, there's that same chart that we looked at. And so let's take a look. So one of the things he said here I thought was kind of interesting is right here. He said, as recessions near their end, value strategies rebalance into the beat-up value stocks at their cheapest levels of the cycle. In other words, people are going to realize these stocks are cheaper than they should be, and if we can buy them low and get a really low cost basis, we're going to make a lot of money. Gee, where'd you hear that from? Basically a year and a half I told you that. And as the recovery advances, the cheaply priced value stocks, in other words, cost basis, bought when most unloved, cost basis, that's your boy right here, begin to reward the investors who had the courage to buy them. And so it's not just courage. I'll disagree with him on that. But it's understanding the reasons to buy them. You don't need courage to buy stocks. That's stupid. That's how you go broke. But when you understand what to buy and why to buy them and when to buy them, well, that's when you're going to make a lot of money. So anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting. So just goes to show you this guy isn't really, not necessarily coming up from the same place that we are, but he kind of figured it out after doing all his little nerd math statistics and charts. All right. So the other thing I was wondering about, probably over the last few weeks, and I decided to look it up today, was how do they test for the Delta variant? So in other words, like you hear them say, oh, blah, 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 80% of the COVID tests are Delta variant, or Delta variant is going ravaging around the country. And I thought to myself, well, how do they know it's the Delta variant? How do they know it's not the old virus, the initial virus? How do they know it's not some other variant? The South African variant, this whatever variant, I don't know, the Utah variant, whatever. I don't even know if there's such a thing. And I just really thought well, they have PCR tests, but they're like the same tests they did last year. And they're not really all that great at testing for COVID anyway, but all of a sudden now they're going to have this amazing Delta variant test that can differentiate between variants. Kind of dubious on that. So I went ahead and looked through here, and I came to this article here from The Sun, which, again, get out of the U.S., read stuff abroad, and you get some interesting, really generally a lot more unskewed feedback that you're going to have here. So so they asked dangerous Delta, how do they test for the COVID-19 Delta variant? And they're going to tell you really honestly. Well, first, they're not going to be honest. The highly contagious variant is accounting for over 80% of the nation's COVID cases. This is British nation, not the U.S. According to the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention. So maybe it is the U.S. one. But it's a British, the U.S. Sun. Got it. Okay, so it is this country, but it's basically a British newspaper. So you're like, all right, 80% of, and I feel bad for this dude. Dude, what are you doing? If you were in any other year, if you were like 6 years ago and you saw this one, you think they're trying to pull the guy's brain out. He does not look happy whatsoever. But they say 80% of the nation's COVID cases. Well, how do they test that? They have to have a test that differentiates it, right? So if you get, 100 people and you have a test and 100 people come back positive, 80% of them, tick off the Delta variant test, and 20% are the other ones, right? Well, I wish that were the case. Although there is no specific test for the Delta variant, it's likely a positive result indicates you have interacted with the variant, according to Health and Human Services of Texas. But if that's true, how do you justify this sentence? 80% of the nation's COVID cases. If you're sitting here and saying that if you got a positive COVID result means you're infected with the variant, that's 100% right here. Why is it 80%? They're lying to you. This is literally the next paragraph. Oh, and I hit that little hyperlink, my bad. This is literally the next paragraph. Paragraph 1, paragraph 2. That's either they are the dumbest journalists on earth, or this is straight up propaganda, but they're actually telling you something if you read correctly. So maybe it's like a little code they have or something. They're sending up the bat signal, and only certain people know what that means. But anyway, something to consider, that when they're telling you things that blatantly, you really need to question whether they're telling you the truth about anything. All right, so a couple things about Yahoo Finance we'll talk about. Wall Street is worried about slowing growth and relentless inflation. Again, it's hard to have growth when you're sitting here firing nurses and firing people because they won't get the vaccine, which is just, anyway, it's not really the most numerical thing in the world, but anyway, something to think about. So they talk about slowing growth and relentless inflation, and there was a term in the 70s that they had for that called stagflation. The economy is stagnant and you have inflation. It's Jimmy Carter. And I was beginning, the only thing that, having grown up when I was a tiny little kid in the 70s, the only thing that Joe Biden hasn't brought back that the 70s had, you'd say bell bottoms, but I literally see girls wearing bell bottoms all the time, is gas lines. And I guess living in California, I see gas lines at Costco, but there were gas lines at every gas station. Other than that, I see every single thing that Jimmy Carter did, Joe Biden is doing, but actually a lot worse. So one of the things that I want to talk to you about that nobody really talks about, this thing about relentless inflation. And people are like, oh, inflation's a bad thing. Well, inflation is a zero-sum game. It's either it's good for some and it's bad for others. If you have cash under your mattress or just cash sitting in a bank account, inflation sucks because it literally eats away at the value of your money. On the other hand, if you have debt, inflation's amazing. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, let's say that you have a student loan and it's $10,000. If there's no inflation, then your student loan is worth $10,000. So you got to pay back $10,000 worth of student loan. But if all of a sudden inflation goes through the roof, then that $10,000, let's say it goes up 100%. That means realistically, in relative terms, you only have a $5,000 student loan because you're going to pay it with cheaper dollars. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is because when it comes to the stock market, you want inflation. Because what it is when you bought your stock, you want the value of, it takes a certain number of dollars to buy a certain number of a particular product. If it's, I know beer went up a lot. If it costs, $10 for a 12-pack of beer and all of a sudden it's $18 for a 12-pack of beer, it sucks, right? Well, unless you're the beer maker. But if you bought the raw product at a certain amount and all of a sudden everybody's having to pay more for it, you're going to make a lot of money. So if you've done what I've asked you to do and buy stocks as cheaply as possible, and then all of a sudden inflation rears its head, it means the stock market's going up because it takes more dollars, and all inflation is, it's an increase in the money supply. It takes more dollars. By the way, I don't know if you know that. Literally the definition of inflation is it's an increase in the M1 or M2 money supply, which is the amount of physical dollars in the world, and that's M1, or M2 is the amount of physical dollars in the world, M1, plus all the money that's in bank accounts. So physical cash out there plus money that's in bank accounts. But if you have stocks, it just means you're gonna make a lot more money. So just goes to show you, when you hear inflation, it's not always a bad word. You just have to be leveraged for it. All right, so we talked about that a little bit. And then one of the things I saw here, it said soaring oil and sagging bond prices. We're not talking about bond prices. I'm going to save you that headache. Or complicating DC's messy talks. I'm not even talking about that. Oil, when it's going up, represents two things: inflation and demand. So when you see oil prices going up, it means more people are competing to buy a certain amount of oil. So there's X amount of oil in the market. If the price goes down, it means that there's not enough people buying it, and the people selling it are willing to offer it at a lower price to get rid of it. Whereas if the price of oil is going up, it means you have a certain amount of oil out there, and there are so many buyers that people are bidding it up. What that means is that's a very, very early sign of an economy that's going to go through the roof. So we bought stocks early. We talked about that. Inflation works on our behalf. Delta's going away. All these things are going in the right way. So what I would say is this: at some point in time, when you see Delta start to go away, you're going to see a massive uptick in your portfolio. And if you looked right here, in fact, we're going to take a look through June. This is right when Delta hit, right here. went down here, kind of sucked in this area. I got all the way down to 116, which don't get me wrong, I was not happy about that. But since then, it's gone from a point where it's been about 134, and now it's basically gone up about 25 grand in that time. So we'll take a look at that on the 3-year mark. So it's gone from 116 to about 160, so about $46,000, and we're anticipating that continuing to go up. So anyway, with that being said, read between the lines. That's where the money's being made. And if you have any questions, let me know. But that is the skinny, and that's how you make money.
To get more information on the sales cheat code, go ahead and click on the subscribe button below. Also, down below in the video description, down there, there's a link that takes you to our website that gives you additional content, some additional freebies that we have, and gives you information on some programs that we have that have been proven to help people to make sales easy so that you can make the kind of money you want, live the lifestyle that you've always wanted, and not have to struggle in the process. And what might be the coolest thing of all is you don't have to put much effort into it. It truly is a cheat code that most people don't know about. And it's a cheat code that can change your life today. So click on the link below and let me help you start to experience these results starting right now.